Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, July 18th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 44 days, the game against Michigan in 135 days. Today we are talking college football playoff. Again, we're going to do it with our buddy Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. We've done this a couple times before and gotten some pretty good feedback on these shows because there's a lot of interesting scenarios with this year's college football playoff. Expanded field, games on campus sites, certain teams getting byes that you would think, why would that team get a bye? And then trying to map out everyone's potential path to a national championship. So we're going to do that today. We're going to be using the Pick 6 Previews rankings. Brett Ciancia does a great job with that magazine. I buy that every year. Bought it again this year. Got my digital copy about a week ago. Immediately started going through it and then thought, we should do one of these shows with that. So, all right, Kevin, we're going to run through just the top 12 right now. It all seems pretty reasonable to me. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Utah. They were not necessarily the number 3 team in the nation, of course, but they would be the Big 12 champions, so they would get the number 3 spot in the college football playoff. Number 4, Miami. Again, same thing, just the ACC champion. Number 5, Texas. Number 6, Oregon. Number 7, Ole Miss. Number 8, Notre Dame. Number 9, Penn State. Number 10, Florida State. Number 11, Alabama. Number 12, Boise State. And I think the first thing that jumps out to me is, other than Utah, which is kind of, become a power, a national power program in the last few years, boy, there's a lot of big names in that college football playoff field, and that feels like something that a lot of people would be interested in watching.
Yeah. Oh no! Don't expand the field. Don't give me more high leverage games to watch. I see once again we are overvaluing Notre Dame, putting them anywhere in the playoffs. It's kind of that January swoon that Chris Holtmann went through, and I'm just kind of expecting that to happen for Notre Dame again. But yeah, a lot of excitement, as you'd mentioned. People, I'm sure, are circling Utah 3 and Miami 4, and how does that happen? But the way that with the auto bids and everything else, and not only getting the auto bid, but also getting that first round bye is so important. I'm sure our audience, being largely Ohio State fans, probably have issue with Ohio State being 2 versus 1. But I think that even if they're saying Ohio State's 2, that is probably inferring a win against Michigan, obviously a win in Indianapolis, and probably an undefeated season to boot. So, before you thumb your nose at Pick 6 Previews, who I think does a great job as well, just kind of look at the subtext. And the subtext is that at this point, Ohio State is probably unbeaten.
Yeah, Ohio State unbeaten, maybe 1 loss, but yeah, you're seeing the Buckeyes 1-2 with Georgia, with the Bulldogs being number 1 in most of those preseason previews. But there is no great shame in being number 2 in the preseason. So let's run through that first round again. Just to remind you, the first round is on campus this year. There's 1 game on Friday, December 20th in the evening. Then Saturday, December 21st, there's 3 games in the early afternoon, late afternoon, and evening windows. So those 4 games in some order are going to be number 12 Boise State at number 5 Texas, number 11 Alabama at number 6 Oregon, number 10 Florida State at number 7 Ole Miss, and number 9 Penn State at number 8 Notre Dame. And when you were talking about Notre Dame earlier, I thought, boy, they have not won a major bowl game, a BCS bowl game, a college football playoff bowl game since 1994. They won, I believe, the Cotton Bowl in 1994 against Texas A&M. It has been 30 years. It would be somewhat appropriate, Kevin, if Notre Dame was the first team to lose a home college football playoff game. And, playing number 9 Penn State, that seems like that could very easily happen.
Yeah, no real cold weather games except for a game in South Bend at Notre Dame Stadium. Everything else kind of breaks into warm weather. I mean, I don't necessarily know what December is in Eugene. We're not talking about Pullman, Washington, or anything like that when we look at that. But, it's really interesting to kind of view some of those games, maybe some contrast of styles. I will admit, starting at the bottom, I don't know a ton about Boise State this year, other than the fact that their field is blue. And that's about all that I know about the Broncos. It has been a couple of years since they have had any relevance to me in terms of following what's going on. So you don't know at that point. But I think that Notre Dame Penn State game is by far, if you tell me that I can only watch 1 game over that weekend in the college football playoff, that's the one that I'm going to be most interested in, because obviously Penn State. You got to wonder with James Franklin. He's winning enough to keep the Wolves away, but he's not winning enough to keep the Joe Bots happy out there either. So, you got that on one side. On the other side, is this a referendum on Marcus Freeman as the head coach of the Fighting Irish? I mean, they win the games they should. They don't win the games that they shouldn't really. That's the one that I'm most interested in seeing.
Well, we will see if we get to see that in December, but however those games shake up, you're going to end up with a couple really, really interesting matchups there. Alabama having to get on an airplane and fly out to Oregon in December. Yeah, I am like you. I don't exactly know what the weather in Eugene is like in December. I can't imagine it's warm and sunny out there in December, but we will see. So after that first round, then you get to the quarterfinal games. The quarterfinals this year, New Year's Eve and the Fiesta Bowl, and then that's one game. And then on New Year's Day, January 1st, starts with the Peach Bowl in the early afternoon, the Rose Bowl in its traditional late afternoon time slot, and then the Sugar Bowl in its traditional evening time slot. So just projecting forward, it would likely be the winner of number 12 Boise State versus number 5 Texas, so probably Texas, playing against Miami, and I'm going to guess that's in the Sugar Bowl. Brett didn't project these. I'm kind of just sort of going based on some of the other projections and where they've had teams slotted in. So we'll say the Texas-Miami game in the Sugar Bowl. Alabama, Oregon winner against Utah. That's probably, to me, the Fiesta Bowl would make sense. Utah, not a huge TV draw, and you're going to put that on New Year's Eve instead of New Year's Day, where those games typically don't get quite the numbers they would normally. That Utah geographically would make sense to go to the Fiesta Bowl as well. Florida State, Ole Miss winner taking on Ohio State in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and then Penn State, Notre Dame winner taking on Georgia in the Peach Bowl at noon or 1 o'clock or thereabouts on New Year's Day. I look at that and I think Ohio State, Georgia winner, probably should both win somewhat comfortably, touchdown, 2 touchdowns, something like that. But let's say it's Oregon against Utah in the Fiesta Bowl, and it's Texas versus Miami in the Sugar Bowl. It feels like we might be down to 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams heading into the semis.
Just as everybody would expect with the Big Two. And I don't think that is a stretch by any part of the imagination. That's where the power is. I mean, no disrespect to Utah that we've already kind of put through at least into this second round, but Cam Rising, Dr. Rising, I mean, he's ready for AARP at this point. I don't know enough about the Utes. That certainly they perform well in big games, but I don't know if they're going to have enough in that one. And, I think that you sit there and you put Ohio State, Ole Miss against, all the offense in the world in that game with Lane Kiffin. Maybe Lane Kiffin will once again forget to run the running back, going back to the 2014 Sugar Bowl when he was OC at Alabama. Or you could sit there and talk about maybe homeless Florida State with where we don't know exactly what their future holds at the time of us recording this. They're hurtling towards Big 12 membership. I don't know if that's necessarily what they were hoping for, but that's going to be really exciting. And then what is with what everybody's saying Oregon's supposed to be this year. And Oregon could have a couple of losses or could have a split against Ohio State, or we don't know. But, these teams seem to be on the track to play a couple of times this year. It'll be interesting to see what happens there because we're really getting into the longest type of seasons at this point of where you're potentially playing 15 games or whatever. And we're here at game 13, game 14, what have you. It's a lot. And you're going to have to kind of wonder what roster management looks like.
Yeah, that's going to be a big challenge. I feel like we talk about that just about every second or third show about the challenges of roster management this year, but it is going to be, I promise, a big storyline as the season goes along. Managing snaps, managing injuries, all that kind of stuff as you play a longer season than you've ever played before. And so then you get to the semifinals, and this is typically the weekend where you would have seen the season end. Now there's another round after this, but the semifinals, Thursday, January 9th in the Orange Bowl, Friday, January 10th in the Cotton Bowl, and this would have Georgia facing the Texas-Miami winner in the Orange Bowl, so you have potentially a Georgia versus Texas could be the third time those teams are playing this year. And then in the other one, in the Cotton Bowl, you could have Ohio State versus Oregon for potentially the third time this year as well. We'll see, can you get too much of a good thing? This might be the year that we find out, because it feels like with those two teams, Georgia, Texas, and then also Ohio State, Oregon playing in the regular season, and then potentially setting up for a conference championship rematch, and then potentially setting up for another matchup in the college football playoff. It feels like you might see three matchups between at least one of those pairs and potentially both this year.
I hope that we don't see the committee cook the books to try and move things around to prevent this from happening in the semis, and that, well, we can't handle we can't do anything about it if it happens in the championship game. It is what it is. You've cleared all the hurdles, but I hope we don't see any cooking of the books on that instance. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I'm going to write a third tail of the tape on Ohio State, Oregon. I'm probably just going to post the other two together and say somewhere between these. I don't know. But, I think that we will all have very good working knowledge of the Oregon Ducks by that point, if that is the third time that they play. And then obviously on the SEC side, having Georgia and Texas, Texas being in its first year in the conference holding its media days in Dallas. I mean, it just seems like that's just all kind of shaping up for that. And then, Georgia is Georgia. And until you really, kick them out of that top spot, it's hard to bet against the Bulldogs. I mean, I guess for everything except, a driving safety course.
Well, and what's interesting is, if the committee does kind of cook the books, as you were saying earlier, and maybe you flip Georgia and Oregon to avoid having a potential semifinal rematch, then you get the Buckeyes facing Texas in the Cotton Bowl, having to play Texas in Texas, and then in the conference, in the national championship game, if they advance there, you have to play Georgia in Georgia. That's something that we have seen in one of the other projections that we did a couple weeks ago, but certainly would not be the route that Ohio State would choose, but there's really no precedent right now in terms of how the committee is going to sort these things out. Are they going to try to avoid rematches? Are they going to just do the straight seeding? Are they going to get cute and set up matchups of potentially a former coach with with his new team or something like that? We'll see how that all shakes out. Then the national championship game, January 20th in Atlanta. We'll say it's the Buckeyes and the Bulldogs, but there's a lot of football to go between here and there to get to that point, and that football season really sort of kicks off in Big Ten country next week. Kevin and I will be in Indianapolis along with Tony, covering Big Ten Media Days, a 3-day event this year with the new 18-team conference. There's going to be a lot of football to talk about, a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of exciting storylines, new coaches, new teams, new players, lots of exciting stuff there across the Big Ten, and of course in Columbus, Ohio as well, where there is a lot of anticipation for the season. If you want to get in on the ground floor, get great access, insider information, and much more, a great place to do that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Kevin, Tony, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Get our whole team of X's and O's gurus, making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.